Listen, I'm. Oh, never mind. We live.
Why don't you let it rip, buddy? Come on.
Nah, I'm not. I'll spare Jesse today.
That's the funniest shit.
Hope he sees this.
Anyway, what's up? I'm James. I have already been talking for like 2 hours this afternoon about things, so my throat is going to be fucked for tomorrow. But if you didn't catch the last live that was happening, I'm the owner of PaydirtDFS.com. Welcome to a show going over the things on PaydirtDFS.com. If you have not checked out the site, you absolutely should. I just did a really long kind of Q&A walkthrough with Sheets Pone, otherwise known as Sheets, otherwise known as Eric Haber, owner of True DFS, and he was really impressed with everything. So go watch that video. That is up on the YouTube and also on Twitter under live. If you've ever had any interest in Paydirt. But without further ado, we have a Thanksgiving slate to talk about. So, Jason, how you doing today?
Doing all right. I'm ready to eat tomorrow. I'm ready to hopefully take some trophies too. We're going trophy hunting even on a holiday. Doing well, man. How about you?
Man, I'm okay. How are you, Tribe?
I'm good, man. I actually had to work today, but then my supervisor was like, "Yo, you got 4 kids. Log off and don't come back till Monday."
It's love right there.
Yeah, I also have to work today.
My condolences, buddy.
I'm hoping to not have to work too much tomorrow.
How the NBA injury reports looking?
Well, I mean, the nice thing is that 14 games played today, they don't fucking play on Thanksgiving, so I don't got to worry that much about that. One caveat before we do start this. So this is going to be a slate breakdown of the Thanksgiving slate. One note is that I do not have Drew Lock projected right now. I was going to go through the process of building out that projection before we did this, but frankly, it doesn't fucking matter that much. Like, if you were going to play a New York Giants quarterback named Tommy DeVito, you probably are fine with playing a New York Giants quarterback named Drew Lock. The price difference is not enough to matter. It doesn't affect builds whatsoever. So the projection likely will be very similar. So I just want to get that caveat out. But we were talking a little bit about Thanksgiving in general. I had mentioned that my turkey's name is Torkels. I always name my turkey. I think it's important. We are hosting this year. He's sitting in a brine in the fridge right now. This is the first year that we have injected our turkey before a brine. We're going full out here. Had to break the arms and everything, but yeah, I'm pretty excited. So, Jason, you said you don't like turkey, right? You think turkey is bad?
You have to treat it really, really well for me to really be into it. It's just kind of bland. I equate it to unseasoned grilled chicken, right? It's just not really doing it for me. But you give me a ham, I'm much happier with that. But yeah, not a turkey guy. I heard Tribe's a huge turkey guy though. Huge.
I'm not a huge turkey guy whatsoever. We do not have turkey. I have 6 Cornish hens that I did various treatments with, and we got 2 legs of lamb. So that's nice.
I've never had Cornish ham or Cornish hen. I have had legs of lamb. I think that's pretty good. I'm not a huge turkey guy myself, really. I'm excited for it this year because we are like going through like the full brining and like all that kind of stuff, and that should improve it a lot. I'm hoping it's the best turkey I've ever had, but regardless, I'm not a huge turkey guy either. I understand people who love turkey. It's a super polarizing thing, I think. I think turkey is super polarizing. But
for sure.
All right. Well, people don't give a shit about my turkey takes. Let's go ahead and jump into this. So, as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or whatever, feel free to comment them. We're going to jump in. So, this slate overall, I think, is pretty good from what initial ownership projections show and from kind of medians and everything like that. I had mentioned the New York Giants thing at the beginning. Actually, before we even get into the models, I think that it's probably worthwhile to just talk a little bit about the slate in general. So 3-game slates, like we have for Thanksgiving, like we have every single year. 3-game slates are, I think people make mistakes in trying to over-correlate them. It feels nice to be stacking one game and then ignoring another game and having running backs from one game, right? I used to do that, and it feels nice thematically. But it doesn't really do that much for you, all things considered. The shorter a slate, aka the less games that you have on a slate, the less correlation matters and the more that raw points matter. So I think that a mistake people make is trying to over correlate or even correlate in general, right? Like you can use it if you think that any given quarterback is going to throw a touchdown to, Jared Goff can throw a touchdown to 4 different players. If you think that that happens, you shouldn't feel inclined to pair him with any player individually. The raw points matters a lot more. So, even if he throws one touchdown to 4 different guys, Christian Watson could outscore all of them and be a better player than any of them by having 2 touchdowns. So the shorter slate, less correlation matters. Thanksgiving slates, the other kind of main thing about Thanksgiving slates is that the salary cap is a suggestion and not an actual cap. If you're building competitive lineups, they almost will never use the entire cap on Thanksgiving. That they will be, $1,000 under or less, between $45,000 and $49,000. I think that those 2 points are really, really important. So that the general heuristics of building out lineups, I think, could just get thrown out the fucking window on Thanksgiving slates. So, Tribe, do you have any thoughts on Thanksgiving slates in general?
I do. We are on complete opposite sides as far as roster construction, by the way.
I'll take that.
Everything I look at just historically suggests that when it comes to like the top lineups in large field GPPs, especially relative to like what has top finishes compared to what the field is playing, people aren't correlating enough.
That's
people fair. Continue to try and play like, and I think this bears out too, like in conversations that, in the Discord about this slate, is people focus too much on trying to build the optimal lineup.
Sure.
And trying to, nail all of the right pieces at every single position. Which when you do that, you start going down that rabbit hole of trying to predict outcomes. So yeah, I'm kind of on the train of I am probably stacking, like overstacking, like QB +2 with the running back, particularly if like I think the team is going to score a bunch of points on these slates. But at the end of the day, it's a 3-game slate on Thanksgiving, and we see wild stuff happen every single year on these. So, shout out to our boy Blender. This really is a play what you want.
Yeah. Jason, how do you feel about Thanksgiving slates?
Yeah, this I'm probably more in Tribe's camp just with the overall roster construction. The one thing I really like about these 3-game slates is that if you really get the right game environment right, and you can really just focus on, I don't want to focus on individual plays, because right now it's like on like a big Sunday slate, it's almost you're kind of ranking guys at like who's the best at their position as opposed to like point per dollar, how they rank, or like versus their salary. And I like really just targeting a game environment. And I'm coming from an MME perspective. I'm probably going to pick my favorite game environment, and I'm going to set a rule for maybe like 40% of my lineups where I'm going to go, I want at least 4 to 5 from this game. That's probably the way I'm going to approach it. And I like that a lot, because if you do it with the late games and you maybe just work in pieces of the first game you like, you could really find out quickly if you're dead or not. Other reason why I really love Thanksgiving slates, it has a little bit of like an NBA feel to it, where late swap I think is very, very crucial and very, very important. So I'm excited for it, but that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to overstack some spots. And the biggest mistake I think people are going to make tomorrow is, like Tribe said, find the optimal. I think when people try to find the optimal, they try to play everything and they don't really take a stand somewhere. And that's where I think we're going to have a little bit of an edge.
Awesome. Yeah. So you guys disagree with me. You can go fuck yourself. Yeah, we can jump into the models here. Look, I don't necessarily disagree with you guys. When I say that I think that it's fine to ignore correlation, I just think that when you're building out the things that end up winning these kinds of slates are mostly dedicated to the quarterback. If we're going to talk about research that like shows this kind of stuff out, Tribe, I think that is right, that people are not correlating enough. I think that what people are mostly not doing, there's 2 things that I find when I do research on this stuff. One, people, if you don't have the quarterback from the highest scoring game, like, you're fucked. If you don't have the quarterback from the team that scores the most points, you're fucked. And two, if you are using all of your salary, you're fucked. Those are the two things. So if you are focusing, if you were to just build for this slate without any projections at all, focus on the teams that have the highest totals and put your salary cap max at 49.5K. Do not max out your salary, and that's the best place that you can start. And all that being said, we can now go ahead and take a look at the models and kind of go into what they are saying. So as we are talking about team totals, right? The highest team total on the slate is Detroit at 29.75. The Lions obviously have the highest total. They are scoring like 31 actual real life points per game. It is pretty incredible. And this spot is really no different. Like going up against Chicago Bears defense is not anything that is daunting by any means. So I think that is one spot to start. We sort by overall team total. Next, we have Green Bay. What is that? Why did that open up like that? Next, we have Green Bay at 25.75, right? Which has Jordan Love, Christian Watson, and Tucker Kraft as like the lowest overall, and Jaden Reed plus Christian Watson is the highest. So Jordan Love also viable. But then we fall way down, right? Then we have 21.75 for Miami, 21 for Dallas, 18.75 for Chicago, and only 17 for the Giants. And that's going to drop even farther with Drew Lock in, I'm pretty sure. It might not move at all. We'll see. But with all of these, it's pretty clear that if you were just going to follow that heuristic of having the quarterback with the highest overall team total and scores the most points, Detroit and Green Bay should be on your radar. When we get to the contest sims here in a couple minutes, like we'll see that Green Bay their wide receivers at the very least are very undervalued. So from a high level, just from the stacks perspective, Jason, what are you looking at for this week?
Yeah, so for this week, I think it's more important than ever on a small slate like this is to really think about how teams are going to score points and how that's distributed with their team total. I think if you approach this slate going with the thought process of like Detroit's not going to hit their team total or Green Bay's not, or they're going to go over it, I kind of think that's the wrong way to think about it. I think you should really maybe consider just if a team has an outlier outcome, what happens, right? In a game environment, then what happens? The first thing I look at, and they're showing on the sheet on there, but they're not, Green Bay or Detroit. It's really hard for me to look past Miami here, especially because when I look at Green Bay, right, and I don't know if maybe the models have, or maybe Vegas even has Miami's team total. Frankly, I think it's low. The Packers, the last 3 games, actually the last 5 games, played San Francisco with no weapons, Chicago with their first game and a brand new offensive coordinator, and it was actually like a pretty close game. Detroit in a bad weather game, at the Jaguars and against the Texans, and the Texans didn't have a lot of their weapons that game either. And they've been in like really, really close games. And I think Miami's a good team. They're finally hitting a little bit on all cylinders. I know we're waiting for Tyreek Hill, but Pablo was right. And Pablo in the Discord, for people that don't know, he's a Miami Dolphins homer, but he's on the money about, their offense and how they need to get their timing back and their rhythm. I just think if you think that the Green Bay Packers are going to hit their team total and you think Miami's going to hit theirs, I don't see how you don't build around this game. As it could just be some fireworks. I want to look at Miami a lot. I also like Miami a lot because the way you can stack them, they're that team where you can do an overstack and feel confident that points are going to get distributed if they do well. It's going to go some to H-Chad. It's going to go either Hill or Waddle. And Jonnu Smith is like is having a resurgence now. He's the best fucking tight end in football. Like, I don't understand. But I really, really like Miami as a place to start. I think Tua is going to go a little overlooked, and I know our contest sims have him as a positive value. Slightly negative value, I should say. But he's coming in as one of the lowest owned quarterbacks on the weekend. Maybe that'll change once Drew Lock is, factored in. But I think I want to start there, and I think that's a game I definitely want to target and build around.
Yeah, I do really like Miami. When I ran with industry standard projections earlier in the solver as well. I ran with no restraints at all. I just set the minimum salary cap for 49K, and I got 1% Tyreek Hill. If I can stack Miami and have under-owned Tyreek Hill on a 3-game slate, I just want to do that. So, Tribe, what do you think about stacks from a high level?
I mean, I'm in full agreement with both of you on Miami. Detroit also makes sense, with their implied team total. Green Bay, I agree with you, James, is going to get overlooked. And I think part of that is they don't have like that standout pass catcher who just dominates the target share and the usage. And so people are either afraid to stack them because of that, or they're a team I think you see higher owned in large field, like in an MME setting. And I think they come in a lot lower owned in 3-max contests, single entry contests, where it's not necessarily clear what that target tree is for Jordan Love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
a lot more one-offs with the receivers too. So I think there's a lot of leverage, right, in playing the full stack and not just one-offing those receivers.
Yeah, and going back to that idea of like game stacking a game, if you were gonna game stack a game, it's probably this one. This game, it has the lowest spread, and it has, 2 teams that have firepower. Like this would be the game, but that's kind of the problem, I think, is that the vast majority of people who are going to game stack game are going to game stack this one. Maybe they'll stack Detroit or Chicago with a bring back from the other side, but I don't think people are going to be going 5 men deep on Detroit and Chicago stacks. I'm not sure. But I do think that Miami, Green Bay, when we flip the cards, I think it's going to have a little bit more ownership than we are projecting, just because I do think that people look at this game the same way that we're looking at it and say, fireworks can be here. Let's go ahead and move on to quarterbacks. So quarterbacks on this slate individually, we have Goff overall at the top of medians, but I'll note that nobody has a projection over 20. Like the range of outcomes and like standard deviation between these quarterbacks is really, really low. The median being something like 17 fantasy points or 16 fantasy points plus or minus 2. It really doesn't matter who you play at quarterback in terms of value. Like that they're all the same, which is one of those things of like, if what you wanted to do was play like Cooper Rush because he's free or Drew Lock because he's free and then just jam studs everywhere else, like the projection is probably going to be about the same. You're going to be within 3 fantasy points of any other quarterback on this slate. And this is, you got to remember, this is including team totals. So when I look at quarterbacks, I'm just like, okay, this does not give me any direction on this slate, to be completely honest with you guys. And that's one of the hard things about these Thanksgiving slates is if you don't have a Lamar Jackson, or if you don't have a Patrick Mahomes, or if you don't have, you don't have one of these elite quarterbacks, or if you don't have enough of a range, it's kind of like whoever you want, right, Tribe? Like, right?
Yeah. And I think this goes into what you were saying before about, you mentioned like on these slates, like if you don't have the highest scoring quarterback, like you're pretty much dead, right? And so people are going to absolutely convince themselves to play Drew Lock or Cooper Rush, and then we will see the full tilt when Tua or Jordan Love or even Caleb Williams, maybe, right, like just goes off and finishes with 30 fantasy points, and every other quarterback on the slate finishes with 15. And it's one of those situations where it's like, no player X, no cash. So I don't think you want to go into this basing your quarterback decisions off of median outcomes, because they all are so close to each other. It's not really going to gain you anything by trying to build that way.
Yeah. How do you feel about quarterbacks on this slate, Jason? I think you probably feel the same.
I do feel the same, but the one thing I will say, and I guess in a 3-game set, it's a little bit easier to diagnose. And I'm not trying to predict outcomes, but when I'm looking at the projections of these people, I'm kind of like, I'm with both you guys. I don't really get any sort of clarity. But what I do want to think about is, which quarterback do I think has the most paths to have a ceiling unlocked on a game like this? And it just goes back to the game environments. I mean, just right off the bat, I think we all know that Detroit can kind of score any way they really want to. So you may be looking at Goff as like, while he has the best median, there's paths where he doesn't get there. Caleb Williams is like leading the league in dropbacks the last 2 weeks, right? So if you're telling me that in a game where they're going to be underdogs in a dome and he's going to be able to throw as much as he can, maybe you have interest. But yeah, I'm really looking at it from more of a game environment perspective. It's not even a salary or a projection to me this week. It's just, what game am I targeting? How do I want to play both sides of it? And then I go from there. But that's the way that I'm thinking about each player this week.
Yeah. Yeah. When I look at the contest sims, and we're looking at quarterbacks here, I think this paints a little bit of a better picture. Like, Caleb Williams shows up in 50% of optimals, only projected at 25% owned, whereas Jared Goff only shows up in 15% projected at 30% owned. I think that, like, what that is telling us really is that Caleb Williams is just underpriced. Now, that doesn't tell us anything about the medians, right? That doesn't tell us anything about the median expectation. What it tells us is that when you're actually building competitive lineups, that $1,000 in salary really matters somewhere. Not exactly sure where that is. We'll get into some things a little bit later, but I will say that I understand why Caleb Williams is going to be popular, and I think he will be more popular than 25% owned. Like, I think he's probably going to be second highest owned quarterback on the slate, if I had to guess. And that's going to come in somewhere around like 35 to 40% owned. And if Jared Goff is 40% owned and Caleb Williams 35% owned, then, we only have 25% ownership to deal with, 4 other quarterbacks. So I think we're going to get some really low ownership, especially on Jordan Love, who I really like. He's projected for 22% ownership. I think we come in under that. I think he probably comes in at 10 to 15% ownership. I just don't think people are going to click Jordan Love. So any other thoughts from either one of you guys from the contest sims on quarterbacks?
I just think Caleb is going to come in higher owned than the 24. Like, I think especially in smaller fields, I think he's probably going to land somewhere like 30 to like 33 in that range. Large field, I actually can see him coming in a little bit under than that, just because I'm already hearing some other sites that are pushing like the $4,500 Drew Lock, and you could play Cooper Rush and pay down and jamming the studs. Like, that strategy is what I'm hearing a lot of people tout. So I wouldn't be surprised in the lower dollar stuff you see Caleb right around there, a little bit lower, but in the high dollar, I kind of think he's a sharp play along with Jordan Love. So I expect him like the 150 and the Wildcat. I think he's going to be a little bit higher than that.
Yeah. Tribe, any thoughts before we move on to running backs?
Just echoing Jason's point, I would say be mindful of what type of contest and what the size of the field is you're playing, like as you're using the sims or thinking about the ownership on these guys.
Yeah, I'd agree. Let's move on to running backs here. So as we're looking at running backs, there's a clear group of running backs that are usable and a clear group of running backs that are not usable. You have 7 guys up here: McCain, Gibbs, Jacobs, Montgomery, Dowdle, Swift, and Tracy that have projections, right? That are usable. Then you have a whole bunch of guys that are priced below that 5K threshold that are not usable. And when I say not usable, I mean maybe they'll make it into some MME portfolios. Maybe they'll make it into some 2 to 3% stuff, but you're probably not going to be using them. As I look at this list, the main things that stick out for me are going to be, 1, Dowdell as chalk. I think he's going to be bigger chalk than that. He's probably going to be something like 60% owned. But at 5,500 against the Giants, who are going to be starting Drew Lock, I mean, his workload has been really good. He does project for 15. I totally get it. So I think that that's probably fine. He does have a 4X rate of 17%, projected 43% ownership. Is he going to be a little bit overvalued? Yeah. But I think that also if you're using a quarterback like Love or Tua, it doesn't matter that he's going to be a little bit overvalued because they have a whole bunch of relative value quarterback in your stack. So Dowdell's the first thing that sticks out to me. And then after that, Gibbs and David Montgomery, Gibbs is the one that has more ownership projection here, but both of these guys are totally valuable. And the only other one that I really think is worth mentioning here is Tyrone Tracy at 5,800. I think that he is just as good of a play as Rico Dowdell. Both sides of that game, like let's be honest, it's not like Cooper Rush is a baller. Like there's no reason why the Giants couldn't win this game in a fucking slop fest and have it just be Tyrone Tracy carrying the ball 22 times and having 2 touchdowns. So I also will say, if you have an MME portfolio, you should be doing some DeAndre Swift plus the Bears defense in a handful of your lineups. He's going to be nothing owned. And he does have a really good role. The only reason why his projection sucks is because they're projected to get blown out. So if that game's close and if the Bears have a lead for any given point of time, DeAndre Swift is going to get really, really good opportunity to break the slate at like 15% of it.
Depending on what contest you're in, he might not even be that high, to be honest.
Yeah. So Tribe, how do you feel about running backs here?
Listen, I get it for the reasons you mentioned, but I just can't get behind Rico Dowdell, especially if you're stacking. Like, if you're playing Caleb Williams or you're playing Jared Goff, I just don't see how you play Rico Dowdell at that ownership, given that his projection is really not, like you said, like him and Tyrone Tracy are essentially the same play, right? And even going back, like looking back at last week, the Cowboys scored 34 points. The Giants got blown out and scored 7. And the running backs had the same outcome, essentially. So, it's not like he's far and away just this smash play. So I just think that's such an easy pivot if you're in those types of contests or you're in higher stakes where, you don't want to get too contrarian. I feel that's probably the easiest lever to pull.
Yeah. His workload is good. That's what I'll say. Over the last 4 weeks, he's averaging 60% of the rushing attempts. He's running on 46% of the routes. He has a decent targets per route run at 20%, averaging 12.1 PPR points per game. I mean, the thing is, you have to think about him very similarly to I use this example, but Chuba Hubbard a couple of years ago, or last year, where if he was going to be popular, the only way that he really kills you is if he scores on the first drive. Like if they get a lead, if Dallas gets a lead here and they can just give it to Dowdell for 70% of the rushing attempts, then like he's probably going to be a good value at 5,500. But I don't know that Dallas is reliable enough with Cooper Rush at QB for me to take that shot. Now I will say again, this is contest dependent. I'm in the Wildcat tomorrow. It's very likely that I play Dowdell. Like very likely that I play Dowdell in the Wildcat. I don't know why I would need to get away from him, especially if I'm getting different quarterback. But in the Millie Maker, in that $5 Millie Maker, I don't touch fucking Dowdell with a 10-foot pole. Like any lineup that is competitive in that $5 Millie Maker with Dowdell is going to be duped 20 times or something. And at that point, whatever. So, Jason, what's your view on running backs here?
Yeah, with running backs this week, man, this is and I'm not going to look at it from a projection standpoint. I'm going to look at it for just it's a 3-game slate, so like you have to consider some extreme things if you're going to play MME this week. I look at this as like I'm probably not going to touch Dowdell in 150 max. Like I might put him in lineups where I'm stacking, the Giants, or if I'm stacking Tua, right, and I have these lower owned stacks, like maybe I'll put him in, but. I don't know, man. It's really tough for me to get away from these top guys. The only real guy that I want to mention that doesn't have a great projection, and the only reason why I'm mentioning him is because when they get inside the 5-yard line, he seems to get a bulk of the carries, and that's Roschon Johnson. There's a very, very real possibility that if they find themselves on the 2-yard line once or twice, like he may just come in and punch it in. Their snaps are really not that different. Swift is the guy you want for sure, but they like giving this guy the ball at the goal line. And per our friends over at Fantasy Points, the Chicago Bears actually don't have that bad of like a pass rush matchup this week. So they're insinuating they think Caleb Williams is going to have some time to throw. There's crazy things. I just saying if you're doing 150 this week, I dedicate like 2-3% to these guys that can maybe get there that are a little weird. Outside of that, though, I think you can make some really unique stacks this week and have these guys at bringbacks. Like if you're of the opinion that Detroit's going to absolutely roll them, we have Detroit for looking at the slate. We have Detroit for the highest rushing touchdown expectation on the week. Yeah. They're sitting at 1 3/4 almost. We've seen it on a lot of weeks where both of these guys score, right? So you're not really you're not playing these guys this week thinking like who can go get me 30. Like somebody can get you 15 to 17 and beat out 85% of the other plays. So that's just one thing to think through is just how you're going to use these guys, and you could probably gain more leverage of your combinations of them together versus fading them, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. And you know what it reminds me of was, you remember back when the Saints had like Kamara and Ingram, and there was like a whole like half the season you could have just played both of them together, and like you would have smashed every single week.
Yeah,
I feel
exactly.
like this is like the great value version of that. Like you could absolutely play both of them, and like you just said, like you're not playing these guys because you think you're going to like you're not playing 60% owned Rico Dowdle because you think he's going to smash for like 25 fantasy points. You honestly are expecting him to get those 15 he's projected at, and like because he's $1,000 less than like the next highest guy, you're going to use that money elsewhere. Right.
And also, too, Tribe, just one other thing to add about Tyrone Tracy. James, I love the shout out to him here. Let's call a spade a spade. It's week 12, right? I think we know which direction teams are going in by now. If they're tanking, if they're going to be competitive. They clearly skipped over Drew Lock knowing he's a much better quarterback than fucking Tommy Cutlets, right? Like if they really wanted to be competitive, they would have started the guy with more NFL experience I'm not saying Drew Lock is fantastic, but he's shown us games where he's got a little like cowboy gunslinger in him, right? Like he will throw the ball all over the yard. I think that now Drew Lock in possibly it's either one or two things that I think could possibly happen here. It's like either he's going to sling it all over the yard and he's going to get some red zone opportunities, or they're going to fucking feed him 25 times, right? Like it's just, I just love that spot for a guy like this and a team that's going the complete wrong direction. Especially against Dallas, who, James, I think you'd pick up 20 yards on the ground against them. I think you really could.
I have been in the gym, bud.
I know you've been in the gym.
I make it known. Yeah. What I will say as well with Tyrone Tracy versus Rico Dowdle thing, Tyrone Tracy over the last 4 weeks. So I mentioned that Dowdle was averaging, 70% of the rushing attempts and 20% TPRR, 10% of the targets, and 12 fantasy points per game. Tyrone Tracy over the last 4 weeks, averaging 63% of the rushing attempts on 42% of the routes, 8% targets, 16% targets per route run, and averaging 14.8 PPR points per game. So it really is. I mean, these guys are the same play. It really just comes down to which one is going to be less owned and which side do you think is going to, have control of the game. There's a non-zero possibility that both of these teams just feed their running backs. And then you get both Dowdell and Tyrone Tracy in the same lineup. It's cheap and you can fit everything else, right? Yep. So that's fine too. I think that this slate probably is going to hinge on how you approach that situation. It's very important. Before we move on to wide receivers, we will go take a look at the contest sims running back stuff. It's pretty clear that they do not like Jahmyr Gibbs. Pretty fairly overvalued here. Negative 16% edge. Positive edge here is on DeAndre Swift, like I had said, and Tyrone Tracy, a little bit of a neutral. I did just want to point that out, but we are going to move on because I think that, the contest sims don't tell us anything we didn't know. Whereas with quarterbacks, I thought that it was interesting to point some of those things out. So let's go ahead and move on to wide receivers here. Now, wide receivers are, as usual, a function of the stack that you are making. Most of the time, that's the way that we are thinking about wide receivers. But we should look at these in, for a Thanksgiving slate in just a vacuum. So at the top, we have CeeDee Lamb, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then Malik Neighbors, and then Tyreek Hill. Those are kind of the top 4 overall. And then we break into this mid-range, and then we do have a couple value plays that will make sense here, right? I mean, Christian Watson is pretty decent value at 4,900. Wan'Dale Robinson at 4,700, I think, is a massive value. The models see him as as second most undervalued or second most underpriced wide receiver on the slate, just behind CeeDee Lamb. He has a 4x rate of 13.6%. Gonna be nothing owned. So that a lot of this, again, just hinges on the quarterback that you're planning to use. But from that perspective, you know, we have a couple Dallas guys that are entirely unusable, but we have CeeDee Lamb towards the top. We have a couple Detroit guys who are usable, Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown. We have Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson, who as a combo are very cheap. And then we have a bunch of Green Bay guys as well. The Chicago guys in this mid-range all project about the same. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Dunze all project for around 11 fantasy points. So this is it. When you're looking at wide receivers, I think the most important thing to look at is Keenan Allen, who doesn't project as that good of a value, is projected to be 40% owned. And that seems very similar to the Rico Dowdell thing where, yeah, I get that the workload has been better and I understand that he is cheap, but there's a lot of cheap guys here. Like, why would I play him over Christian Watson? Why would I play him over Wan'Dale Robinson? Why would I play him over Rome Dunze, who's projected to be half of that ownership? You know, there's a lot of guys that I could use rather than Keenan Allen. So I think that's what it comes down to for me. I'm mostly going to be looking at this as a function of my quarterback, but I do think it's interesting that Keenan Allen is going to be so highly owned. Jason, what are your thoughts on wide receiver here?
So I think this is where like people are going to make or break their slate tomorrow. I think that there's very unique game theory pivots you can make here, and that they're not always projection related. And there's some uncertain. I think there's a lot more certainty in uncertain areas. One of them being Green Bay. People are really, really convinced that Dontavian Wicks is going to take this big leap. Like, we're seeing his ownership in like the low to mid 20s in most places. Meanwhile, like his snaps are always been they've been very, very volatile. And with Romeo Doubs out, you know, Wicks is not the X receiver guy that they're going to use there. They're going to use somebody more like a Malik Heath or a Bo Melton that is a little bit better of a run blocker. They can run those little 10 to 15 yard routes and in. I kind of like going that route. So just like how you said, these are going to be a function of which quarterback you use. For me, the wide receivers are going to be a function of the game environment. And that's really what I'm going to focus on here. I'm looking at this right away, just like we never see Tyreek Hill below 7K, and now he's going to be 6,900 and not chalk. Jalen Waddle just had a 30 piece and he's not chalk. Like, I feel like the easiest way you could go about this is just play Tua or Jordan Love. Tua, use these two. If you want to throw Achane or Jonnu Smith in to make it spicier, be my guest. Bring it back with, either Christian Watson and Melton. That's why I love that game so much, is because you can make some combinations where I think people are going to falter. The other guy I wanted to point out, though, that I'm just like really, really interested in getting to this week, it is Wan'Dale. That's definitely one. But I also really do like Malik Neighbors this week. I think he's going to come in a little bit lower owned than people are expecting. You have CeeDee Lamb right there, a Tyreek Hill, right there too, I guess. But I don't know. I think most people are going to use as much salary as they can tomorrow, and they might want to go up to an Amon-Ra. I like Malik Neighbors a whole lot. I think I'm pretty convinced from what I see for Drew Lock in his career that this is an upgrade from Tommy DeVito. So I do like Malik Neighbors quite a bit. I don't know how many people are going to really get to him, though. I think you're going to see a lot of Chicago receivers, getting ownership, cheap Green Bay receivers, and then they're going to pay up. And I think he may get lost in the shuffle a little bit.
I closed the screen on that because I'm running some NBA updates because it's fucking 6 p.m. Eastern. But yeah, I agree. I think that, the Giants, Drew Lock came in for Seattle last year and was bad. but like not Tommy Cutlet's bad, not Daniel Jones bad. I do think that he's an upgrade. And Malik Neighbors, he was literally documented saying, "Yeah, man, I'm tired of fucking losing." Like, he wants to win. He wants to make things happen. He wants to actually like find success. He's not into tanking, and no wide receiver is. But I think that he's a fine play. I think that overall Giant stacks, like from a just leverage standpoint and from a they probably are under-owned standpoint, I think Giant stacks make a lot of sense. Tribe, how do you feel about wide receivers this week? Is there anything that was sticking out to you?
Jalen Waddle being 13% owned relative to Keenan Allen at 40% is nuts. I agree. Like, I love Wan'Dale Robinson as a value. And then, with Malik Neighbors, right? Like he had a floor game with Tommy Cutlets and it was still 6 for 64.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if we think Drew Lock is an upgrade, similar to what we were saying with the running backs, where like I don't know that any of these receivers like go for 30. I mean, you could definitely see like CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill, if he has one of those classic Tyreek Hill games, for sure could get there. But honestly, like 15 to 21 points, you're probably like looking good, to be honest, from these receivers. So, if you're going to get Malik Neighbors as like the clear lowest owned of that top group, why not?
And when you say clear lowest owned too, I do really want to point out that like when I ran optimals earlier, Tyreek Hill was not in them. Like at like 1%. Granted, Malik Neighbors was literally not in them, but Tyreek Hill was 1% owned in the optimals that I ran. And I think it'd be really important to pay attention to what the rest of the industry is saying. I don't know. Have you guys heard anything about Hill across the industry?
Most people are down on him. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. Like I hear people going like, "Oh, like I should probably just give up on Tyreek at this point. Like he hasn't had a good week since week 1." And yeah, people must have forgot. But go ahead, Tribe. I just had to.
I was just gonna say, like, when I was building stuff, and I don't know if this is the same for you, James, but like I was seeing a lot of CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra, right? And then we know you're going to get a bunch of Dowdle. So, like, paying down for those two receivers, right? Instead of CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown, going Tyreek Hill, Malik Neighbors, and then, and paying up at that running back spot. So, it's, going up from Dowdle to like a David Montgomery, going up, paying for two of those higher end guys between Achane, Jacobs, and those guys, and not getting to that 5K range. I think that's perfectly viable, especially in large field contests.
Yeah, I think there's two things on the Tyreek Hill thing. One, people are going to play Amon-Ra St. Brown and CeeDee Lamb because they have the salary, because Thanksgiving slates, right, you hardly ever use salary. And two, I guess people are going to be down on him. It's crazy that we have a $6,900 Tyreek Hill and he's going to come in at like 20% owned on a 3-game slate. I mean, people are going to look back at the slate and be like, what the fuck were we doing? Like, why did we let that happen? There's just an easy button lineup here where you just jam the Detroit running backs and you play Miami and Green Bay as a game stack and you just walk away with 6 figures in your pocket. That just feels like such an easy button lineup, and almost for sure what I'm going to do in the Wildcat tomorrow.
Dude, it makes so much sense. It's like you're just setting yourself up for all these swaps too, right? Like, I think the other thing we also have to mention here, and before we go to the tight ends and whatnot, think about like how points are distributed, right? Like that first game, Detroit Lions, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, what's his ownership?
Yeah, he's going to be.
We got him at 45%. Yeah, he's.
That is the most expensive player on the slate, like with a team that could legitimately punch like 4 rushing touchdowns in tomorrow. Like, well, it's the easiest move you can make is, look, could you draw dead if that game outcome kind of explodes a little bit? Sure. But, I just feel like if you think that Miami is going to have to, try and score here to win, I don't know how you don't just do the pivot. I think that's an amazing pivot. You go from Amon-Ra and what's his name? CeeDee Lamb to Tyreek Hill and Neighbors. It's awesome. I think that's a really good way to go, and I think more people should consider that. And also Dallas, per our friends over at Fantasy Life, they are a top 11 matchup for wide receivers. They get a 15-yard receiving yard boost. They get a fantasy boost of 3%, a target per route run boost of like 1.5. So it's a decent spot for pass catchers too. It's not like they're not some great defense. They suck. They're still the Cowboys, right? So like, I just don't know why people are just so confident that Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to torch the slate.
Well, I don't even think that it's confidence. I just think that it's a team total of 30, right?
It's in total of 30 and a high medium projection.
Yeah. So I understand why, but like here's my thing. I like Thanksgiving food. So if I fade Amon-Ra St. Brown and I'm fucking dead, I'm just gonna eat a lot of turkey. I don't even have to worry about my lineups anymore. If I'm just straight up fucking dead, then whatever. So I do really like that. I think that we're gonna be sparsely talking about tight ends here in a sec, but overall, like the slate just really comes down to how are you treating Detroit stacks? Where do you want to go with them? And if you have 2 to 3 lineups, build one with access to the Detroit wide receivers and one with access to the Detroit running backs, and then just surround them with shit that you think is going to be giving you positive leverage. So let's jump into tight ends here and kind of speak lightly on them. There's really only one tight end that projects well, and then you have a whole bunch of tight ends that just project okay, and then tight ends that are not usable. Jonnu Smith projects very well because he's the reincarnation of Aaron Hernandez.
I hope he's not the reincarnation of Aaron Hernandez.
Well, see, it's funny because he's dead
you
now.
could have named 17 other tight ends. You got to name the fucking murderer.
It's way funnier to say Aaron Hernandez.
It is pretty
funnier. It'll be even funnier if I can say he's the reincarnation of Aaron Hernandez because he killed my lineup. That's even funnier. That's a good joke.
You're going to sacrifice a 333 for the bit. I like it.
I sacrificed more for worse. Jonnu Smith for sure, though. He's the best projection. I actually in the contest sims, Cole Kmet is the highest overall edge in small field. Because he's projected for 12% ownership, and people love playing Caleb Williams. If Caleb Williams is going to have a 50% exposure rate in winning lineups in the contest sims, Cole Kmet is going to get pulled along some percentage of the time. And people are in love with like Keenan Allen, I'm good with Cole Kmet. So whereas wide receivers are a function of your quarterbacks, tight ends are 100% a function of your quarterback. I really just think that you're pairing them with whoever. And my bread and butter over at Paydirt for the last couple of weeks has been to use tight ends in the flex. This week, I think that is a bit worse, but Jonnu Smith, he should be 6K at this point based on his usage and based on how Miami wants to use him in the red zone, but he's still just 4,300 on this slate. So that's too cheap, and you could probably justify Jonnu Smith in the flex if you wanted to. Do you guys have any like thoughts on tight end, or is it mostly just use it with your quarterback?
I agree with that. I do think Jonnu Smith in the flex is actually going to be fairly popular, just from building out stuff. I was getting a lot of double tight end, and this actually shows in the ownership too. I'm getting a lot of Laporta, Jonnu Smith combinations with Smith in the flex. But yeah, like I feel like you can, if you were to one off. Here's my thought. Like you either one off the tight end that actually has like the highest real ceiling, or you just one off the freebie. And so in this case, if I'm not pairing them with my quarterback, I'm either playing Jonnu Smith, or I'm just saying, oh damn, he's not even free this week. Never mind. I was gonna say the Spoonmaker kid from Dallas, but he was free on Sunday. They raised him up like almost $1,000. Never mind.
Not free.
So yeah, like you're pairing them with your quarterback, or if you want a one-off tight end, you play Jonnu Smith and call it a day.
Yeah. Jason, how you feel?
So from a scheme perspective, you would think Sam Laporta would absolutely just crush this matchup, but as they've shown, they don't really need to use him to win. Yeah, for me, it's just Jonnu Smith here. There's not really anybody else. I'm gonna just make it a part of my it's going to be my pool for the game stack, right? Like if I'm stacking Miami and Green Bay, I'm going to have Tucker Kraft in there. The only thing I will say though, and this is going to be very uncomfortable, if you look at the snaps for last week, and again, I'm just saying this is a way to maybe pivot in large field. Don't do this if you're playing a small field contest, but this guy Brevin Spann-Ford is like getting targets and whatnot. So like if you want to roll the dice there, you can, but I don't really see a reason to. It's Jonnu Smith, take Cole Kmet, and just make it part of your game stack. That's really it. But wanted to point him out because he's not getting any ownership, and his usage is a little bit higher, I think, than what his ownership would indicate right now. So that's all I wanted to say. Snaps were similar to Schumacher.
Yeah, and to be clear, like if you can get a 1% owned tight end that has a chance to score a touchdown, like you should probably do that. All of these guys, except for Jonnu Smith, are basically, are they going to score a touchdown or not? Because if they do, then they have made value. Tight ends, the highest median expectation for all tight ends on this slate is very likely 11 fantasy points. Like if you take the entire thing of an aggregate, if you told me a tight end is going to score X fantasy points on the slate, I would say 11. And anything over that, I don't even think we've seen Jonnu Smith run hot as the fucking sun the last couple of weeks, but even his median is still, it's still just 14.6. He should be 6K. He's underpriced for sure, but this is still a really volatile position. So I just think that pairing it with your quarterback or going with a double tight end route and saying Jonnu Smith in the flex, I think that's really just the way to go. Really quick, let's go over Showdown stuff, because I know that people are going to want it, and I'm not putting together Showdown stuff tomorrow because I will be eating turkey. But so exposure rates are still going to be good here, and I think that's worth talking about. So we'll go through each game here, talk a little bit about captains and flex. The ownership does need to be updated tomorrow. I will handle that, but I'm going to talk you through how to use the Showdown sims for tomorrow, since I will not be putting together Showdown seasons. I'll say that again. I'm not putting together a fucking Showdown season tomorrow during Thanksgiving. So overall, what you're looking at is the exposure minus projected ownership, which gives us what the edge is. So for this first game, Jahmyr Gibbs has the highest overall exposure at captain, followed by Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then Jared Goff, and then Caleb Williams. Note that if you've been reading the Showdown seasons, these salaries look much different than before. And update has been implemented to improve the way that the Showdown sims look at captains. It now includes more studs. I think it's a big improvement. But Gibbs is the best overall captain. It's mostly Detroit oriented until you get to Caleb Williams and then Keenan Allen. But even Keenan Allen is still negative value. Overall, the worst value on the slate is actually Keenan Allen. Everybody else looks about correctly valued. From a flex perspective, highest overall edges are Caleb Williams, Jared Goff, and then Swift, Kmet, and Jake Bates. The lowest overall edge is Keenan Allen. So, contest sims feel the same way for this game as the regular main slate stuff does. Keenan Allen just looks overvalued. When projected ownership comes in tomorrow and is leveled out, then I think we're going to likely see the same stuff. But, I just wanted to point that out for this individual Showdown slate. The best plays are going to be Jahmyr Gibbs, Caleb Williams, Jared Goff. It's going to be a Detroit lean. That makes sense. But you would be fading Caleb Williams in the majority of your lineups. Do you guys have anything to add to this, or should I just run through these by myself?
No, I think the Caleb Williams Cole Kmet stack is like a sick way to approach both the main slate if you want to stack the Bears and for this Showdown slate. Yeah, particularly like with a 4-2 Detroit lane, you go Caleb and Kmet and call it a day.
Yeah. I think if you're running Showdown, and I'm just coming from a perspective as like a 20 maxer and 150 maxer, again, just thinking through like if Chicago keeps this game competitive, how do they do it? I would lock Caleb Williams in almost all my lineups here. Like that's what I would do. Just lock him in. Set a rule, 2 pass catchers each with him. I even would set it as I'd probably set this as a max just because I don't think anybody's like really cheap enough to worry about there from a usage standpoint. Set 2, do that, pick a Detroit captain and move on. That's probably what I would do.
Yeah. Yeah, I would. I mean, the way that I usually do it is I use exposure rates as my caps. I would just be way under the field on Keenan Allen. That would be my big lean in MME tomorrow. I'm not going to play the showdowns tomorrow because I think that's too much work for a Thanksgiving slate. But there's a lot of edge in staying away from Keenan Allen and getting a whole bunch more commit. I did run the other ones as well, so we'll go kind of through the same things here. Highest
That's
overall.
gross.
What's up?
I'll say that edge is gross for that Giants game.
Oh yeah, no, it's fucking disgusting, dude.
That's disgusting, dude. Holy shit.
This is a really hard one for Showdown. Dowdell is overvalued at captain. Tyrone Tracy is overvalued. Like most people are overvalued. And then you have Cooper Rush and Wan'Dale Robinson, who look like decent captains. And then CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb is going to be the best captain overall. When you look at edges at flex, again, it's Cooper Rush and then Wan'Dale Robinson, and then just shit. This is a really, really ugly showdown, and I'm glad that the prize pools for it suck. The guys who you'd want to fade are Tyrone Tracy and Dallas Cowboys, and Rico Dowdell. Like, just basically stay away from this Rico Dowdell plus Dallas Cowboys combo. I'm not even going to give you guys time to respond to that one. It's just really gross.
Yeah, you don't want to know what I would do. What I would do at captain there.
No, we don't need to deal with that.
I would lose people a lot of money. Let's put it that way.
We don't need to deal with that.
People a lot of money.
For the Miami Green Bay one, this one is better, right? So we have a little bit of edge here on Tua and Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs, Jonnu Smith. You know, there's some really interesting kind of edges that we have here. For negative, we have Tucker Kraft, but for the most part, you know, we have positive numbers here. From an exposure standpoint, Josh Jacobs, Jonnu Smith, and Devonta Cain are going to be the top overall exposures at captain. From an exposure standpoint at the flex, Josh Jacobs, Devonta Cain, Jonnu Smith, more of the same. But all three of those guys are projected to be higher owned. Now, again, projected ownership will be better tomorrow. But the one that looks the most undervalued here is going to be Tua in the flex, who's projected to be about 17% owned. He's going to be higher than that, I think. But then again, when people look at this slate, who they want to play is a Kane, Tyreek Hill, Josh Jacobs, not Tua. So I do think Tua will still be under-owned tomorrow. And then, you know, I think that if you're going to play a showdown, this is the one to play because it's the most fun. But, you know, do you guys have any quick thoughts on this one before we shut this out?
Yeah, I would just say, like, if I'm playing that showdown slate, I'm probably leaning fading Achane.
Yeah.
He's more touchdown dependent than we actually give him credit for. Like, if you look at that game on Sunday, like, he had 10 carries for 32 yards, and he had a couple of catches. Like, I don't remember offhand how many catches he had, but, like, I would imagine, like, it was like half of his catches went for touchdowns, right?
Yeah.
So you're not projecting 50% of his receptions to score touchdowns. So from a showdown perspective, I'd probably fade him in place of Tua and play Tua instead if I'm going that route. But yeah, that should be a fun one though.
Yeah. Jason, you got any quick thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this is if I'm captaining Jacobs, I'd probably put the Packers defense in there, you know, just to maybe do that. And the other thing I'll mention is that I think you can get really, really funky at wide receiver. I know I'm going to echo this again with the Packers here. There's a major, major overconfidence in some of these guys. And I think even they might not even show it in the Sims, but like, I just think Dontavian Wicks, look at that, 19% owned. Like, nobody's going to play Bo Melton, and he caught a touchdown last week. They came in and ran like 20% more snaps. So I think that's kind of the edge there, is just switch up your pass catchers with Jordan Love. And if you're going to use a Jacobs captain, maybe you fade Tua and Achane and then play the defense. That's probably what I'd say.
I think that's fair. I think that's very fair, boys. All right. That has been the Thanksgiving breakdown. My voice is going to shit. I can already hear myself breaking up a little bit, so I'm going to end it now. But this should be a really fun slate. I think Paydirt's going to take home a trophy here. It was Gordy last year that took home 40K. Hopefully it is me this year that takes home more than that. But thank you guys for tuning in. If you have not gotten a subscription over at Paydirt, I think you absolutely should. You can go subscribe here. We have month-long, year-long, week-long, and daily subscriptions available. If you did not watch the live stream with me and Haber going over the site and the models and stuff like that, I think you absolutely should. he came away with it saying that he had no idea how much was on the site and how much value there was here. I think that you will feel the same way. I will link that over on Twitter as well, or retweet it or put it in the Discord or something. But thank you guys so much for showing up. Thank you, Tribe and Jason, for joining me. I hope that everybody enjoys their Thanksgiving, and I will talk to you guys Saturday in the camera.
Likewise.
All right. Yeah.
Enjoy
See you
Thank
Saturday.
Thanksgiving,
By
boss man.
the way, James, Brandon Ingram got ruled out, so have fun.
That's fine. I was planning on hitting NBA anymore.